He worked the night shift as a grocery store security guard. Quiet, calm, never talked much to anyone. Customers saw him as just an old man standing by the door until 3 masked gunmen walked in. What happened next showed everyone exactly who that quiet man really was. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden courage and instant justice, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe real warriors never forget how to protect others, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Frank Miller, 58 years old, stood at his usual post every night at Murphy's Corner Market in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Same dark blue security uniform, always pressed and clean. Same worn black boots that had seen better days but were polished every morning. His graying hair was cut short, military style, and his weathered face carried lines that spoke of years under harsh sun and harder circumstances. For 8 years, he'd worked the same corner, same shift, same quiet presence. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 6 nights a week. The locals knew him as Frank. Nothing more, nothing less. He'd nod hello, help carry groceries to cars for elderly customers, and make sure the teenagers buying energy drinks at midnight weren't causing trouble. Frank positioned himself in the same spot every night. Not random, though no one would think to call it strategic. Right by the entrance with clear sight lines to both the registers and the back exit. He could see everything, control everything, without anyone realizing he was controlling anything at all. Every evening at 9:45 p.m., Frank would arrive 15 minutes early. He'd park his old Ford pickup in the same space, back corner of the lot, nose out, clear exit route. Not that anyone noticed these details. "Evening, Frank," Tommy, the day shift guard, would say as they switched. "Tommy, anything I should know about?" "Nah, quiet day. Mrs. Henderson forgot her pin again, and some college kids were loud by the beer coolers, but nothing serious." Frank would nod, check the simple logbook, and take his position. After Tommy left, Frank would spend 10 minutes reviewing the day's security footage. Not because management required it. They didn't even know he did it. But his eyes caught things others missed. Patterns, behaviors, people who came in too often, stayed too long, or moved like they were mapping the place instead of shopping. Nobody in Cedar Falls knew much about Frank Miller's past. He'd moved to town 8 years ago, applied for the security job with minimal paperwork, and had been reliable ever since. Paid his rent on time, minded his own business, helped neighbors when asked. But sometimes, small details slipped through, like the time a customer was struggling with a 40-pound bag of dog food. Frank lifted it like it weighed nothing, loaded it into the man's truck with one fluid motion. The customer stared. "You work out, Frank?" "Used to stay in shape," Frank replied. "Old habits, or the night when 2 drunk college students started shoving each other near the beer coolers." Frank stepped between them, didn't raise his voice, didn't touch either one. Just stood there. Something in his posture, his presence, made both young men immediately step back and apologize. They left without buying anything. "How'd you do that?" asked Jenny, the night cashier. "Sometimes people just need to know someone's watching," Frank said. The tattoo on his forearm stayed hidden under his uniform sleeves most of the time. Only in summer, when he rolled them up during restocking, could you catch a glimpse of something dark and angular, military-looking. But no one asked, and Frank never volunteered information. Tuesday night, 11:47 p.m., typical quiet evening. The last regular customer had left 20 minutes ago, Mrs. Chen, picking up medicine for her husband. Now it was just Frank, Jenny at the register, and Mike in the back doing inventory. Frank noticed the car immediately when it pulled into the lot. Dark sedan, windows tinted, license plate deliberately angled away from the security cameras. 3 men got out. At first glance, nothing obviously wrong, but Frank's trained eye caught details others would miss. Their body language was off, too alert, too coordinated. The way they moved together suggested planning, rehearsal, and most telling, they kept checking their watches, checking the street, checking each other. Frank's pulse elevated slightly, but his expression never changed. He casually reached for his radio, thumb finding the emergency button but not pressing it yet. He needed to be sure. The 3 men were now close enough for Frank to get a better look. Mid-20s to early 30s, athletic builds. Their eyes were constantly scanning, not looking at products, but mapping exits, counting people, assessing threats. And then, as they reached the door, all 3 simultaneously pulled ski masks down over their faces. Frank's 25 years of special operations training kicked in automatically. Time seemed to slow. His vision sharpened. Every detail became crystal clear. Subject 1. Lighter position, right-handed, bulge under left arm, moving with authority. Subject 2. Younger, nervous energy, inexperienced based on positioning, weak link. Subject 3. Calm, professional, had done this before, most dangerous. Frank quietly clicked his radio twice, the prearranged signal for Jenny to activate lockdown protocols. Without looking, he knew she was pressing the silent alarm and securing the registers. The confrontation. The 3 masked men burst through the entrance. "Everyone down! This is a robbery." Frank didn't move, stood perfectly still, hands visible but relaxed, watching. "You too, old man." On the ground. Frank slowly began to raise his hands, but his mind was working through combat scenarios. Years of training had taught him to assess, plan, and execute in seconds. Subject 2 was covering Jenny, but had positioned himself poorly. His back was partially to Frank. Subject 1 was approaching the registers, but had to turn away to demand Jenny open them. Subject 3 was sweeping the store, but was momentarily blocked by an aisle display. That's when Frank saw his opening. What happened next took 12 seconds. Frank moved like a man half his age. His first target was Subject 2, the nervous one, covering Jenny. A swift, silent approach from the blind spot. Disarm, control, neutralize. Subject 3 turned at the sound of his partner hitting the floor, but Frank was already moving. Years of close quarters combat training made the second takedown look effortless. Subject 1, the leader, spun around to find both his partners down and an old man who wasn't old anymore standing between him and the exit. "Drop the weapon," Frank said, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. The gunman hesitated, looked at his unconscious partners, looked at Frank's stance, professional, balanced, ready, and slowly placed his gun on the floor. "Jesus Christ," Jenny whispered from behind the counter. "Frank, what the hell?" Frank was already securing the weapons, checking the unconscious men for additional threats, and reaching for his radio to call actual police. His movements were precise, efficient, automatic. "Frank," she said again, staring, "what are you?" Frank looked at her, saw the fear and confusion in her eyes, and for a moment his careful mask slipped. "Just someone who used to have a different job," he said quietly. When the Cedar Falls police arrived 6 minutes later, They found 3 would-be robbers zip-tied with plastic restraints Frank had produced from somewhere, their weapons secured and unloaded, and Frank back in his usual spot by the door as if nothing had happened. Officer Martinez, first on scene, looked around the store. No damage, no injuries except to the perpetrators. 3 unconscious suspects, efficiently restrained. "What happened here?" Martinez asked. "Attempted robbery," Frank said simply. "They changed their minds." Martinez looked at the scene again. 3 fit young men, taken down by one security guard in his 50s. Something didn't add up. "Frank, how exactly did you—" "They slipped," Frank said, meeting the officer's eyes. "All 3 of them, at the same time. Clumsy." Martinez stared at him for a long moment, then looked at Jenny, who was still in shock. That's what happened," she said slowly. "They just slipped." Word spread quickly through Cedar Falls. By morning, the story had grown in the telling, but the basic facts remained. Frank Miller, quiet night security guard, had single-handedly stopped an armed robbery. People started looking at Frank differently, not with fear, but with curiosity, with respect. Tommy, the day guard, was the first to ask directly. "Frank, that thing last night, how does a security guard learn to do that?" Frank was quiet for a long moment, then pulled up his sleeve slightly. The tattoo on his forearm became visible, not fully, but enough. A trident. Wings. The kind of insignia that meant something specific to people who knew what to look for. "I used to work security in different places," Frank said finally. "Different kind of security." Jenny couldn't let it go. That night, after her shift, she did what young people do. She Googled military tattoos, special operations, Navy SEALs. The next evening she came to work with printouts. "Frank," she said quietly, "I know what that tattoo means." Frank looked at the papers in her hands, sighed, and gestured for her to come closer. 25 years, he said simply. SEAL Team 7. Retired 8 years ago. Moved here for the quiet. Figured I'd done enough fighting for one lifetime. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Frank smiled slightly. "Because that life is over. This is my life now. Standing here, making sure people like Mrs. Chen can buy her husband's medicine at midnight without worrying about getting robbed." Jenny stared at him. "But you're a hero. You should be—" "I'm a security guard," Frank interrupted gently, who happened to remember some old training when it mattered. Frank continued working at Murphy's Corner Market. Same shift, same quiet presence. But now the whole town knew. Not the details. Frank never talked about operations, never mentioned deployments, never told war stories. But they knew enough. Veterans started stopping by, not to ask questions, just to nod acknowledgement. Retired cops would buy coffee and exchange knowing looks. Parents felt even safer knowing Frank was watching over the place their teenagers bought snacks. Frank treated them all the same as before. Polite, professional, present. One evening, a young man in marine dress blues came in. Fresh-faced, nervous, clearly stationed at the nearby base. "Sir," he said to Frank, "I heard about what happened. I just wanted to say—" "You don't need to say anything, son," Frank replied. "Just do your job, serve your country, come home safe." The young Marine nodded, bought a Gatorade, and left. But as he reached the door, he turned back. "Thank you for your service, sir." Frank nodded once. "Thank you for yours." Frank Miller never asked to be recognized, never sought attention, never wanted to be anything more than a quiet man doing a simple job in a small town. But when 3 armed men decided to threaten innocent people on his watch, 25 years of training kicked in automatically. He didn't do it for glory, didn't do it for recognition. He did it because protecting others was encoded in his DNA, whether he wore a uniform or a security guard badge. The real heroes don't announce themselves. They stand in corners, work night shifts, and live quiet lives until the moment calls for them to be something more. And then when that moment passes, they go back to being quiet again. Because service isn't about the uniform you wear. It's about the oath you took and the people you swore to protect. Frank Miller understood that. And so did everyone in Cedar Falls who saw him standing in his usual spot, night after night, watching over them. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear security uniforms and stand by grocery store doors, waiting for the moment when old skills become new necessities. So I ask you, have you ever met someone like Frank? Someone who served quietly, protected others without fanfare, and made the world safer just by being present? Share their story in the comments. Tell us how they lived, what they did, how they made a difference. Because here at the Human Stories, we believe that real heroes don't need headlines. They just need to be remembered. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Help us honor the quiet guardians who stand watch while the world sleeps. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks like they couldn't hurt a fly.